Horror movies are funny things. Even casual fans know the tropes of the genre by now. Going into a dark room alone equals death, sleeping with someone equals being maimed, when the previously demure and quiet girl starts spitting feisty one-liners and screaming with anger rather than fear, that means she's the final girl, etc, etc. Horror has learned to subvert expectations, and there is nothing wrong with leaning heavily into these beloved motifs. But we can't help but wish these 10 characters got dealt a different hand by fate. I'm Tilly from What Culture Horror, and these are 10 horror characters you really wanted to live, but knew they were doomed. Number 10. Helen Shivers, I Know What You Did Last Summer. I Know What You Did Last Summer could have easily been another Scream-inspired knockoff that faded into the sea of similar movies, but writer Kevin Williamson, who also penned The Adventures of Sidney Prescott a year prior, carried something unique into this flick. Authentic dialogue, genuine scares, and most importantly, characters you care about rather than just being cannon fodder. One of these characters is Helen Shivers, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar. Helen seems on the surface to be another superficial beauty queen, but she is far more than that. Combining a clever character arc with the natural charm of Gellar, Helen is easily the film's most likeable character. This makes her fate all the harder to watch. Even though the final girl's place is firmly taken, viewers couldn't help but hope Gellar's character would also wriggle her way out of the jaws of death by the end of the film. Sadly, after a dynamic and thrilling chase sequence, she makes one terrible mistake. For some reason, Helen stops dead in her tracks to have a little look around, which allows the killer to get the jump on her. How dare you, Helen? We were rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. Number 9. Tatum Riley, Scream. Just to get the 90s nostalgia fest out of the way nice and quickly. Even though I Know What You Did Last Summer is pretty good, it's Scream that's great. You all know about how it was a satirical game changer for a genre growing stagnant and stale, so let's get into the gory details of this entry. Tatum Riley is the fiercely loyal, kind and supportive bestie to Sidney Prescott, whilst remaining an iconic character in her own right, and I'm not just talking about her amazing outfits. Rose McGowan brings a brilliant mix of warmth and guts to the character who never once falls into cliché. She keeps everyone in check, but is also a shoulder for Sid to cry on, and as we all know, Miss Prescott certainly needs that. But nothing good lasts forever. As the film itself states, anyone who leaves the main group and wanders off on their own in a horror movie doesn't make it to the end credits. So when Tatum does just that, our hearts sank. Granted, Tatum gives as good as she gets till the very end. She's having none of Ghostface antics, but as soon as she set her sights on the garage door, her fate was sealed. It's a hell of a good kill scene and has become an image cemented in horror pop culture. But why did it have to be Tatum? Number 8. Stanley URIS, It, Chapter 2. This isn't the only time a character from a Stephen King story will feature on this list, and fans of his books have a head start on moviegoers here. The 2017 It remake surprised many with how goddamn good it was. Sensitive, mature, funny, and of course, pretty goddamn terrifying. Amongst the central losers club is Stanley URIS, a timid boy who is reluctant to take on the interdimensional terror beast that's haunting his town. Can't really blame him, to be honest. Yet by the end of the film, Stanley overcomes his fears and swears along with his friends to return if Pennywise ever shows his ugly mug again. The clown returns, and fans of the original book and miniseries knew that Stan would not. It's Chapter 2 opens 27 years later, and Mike Hanlon sends each member of the Losers Club a letter to inform them of this grim news. None of them are happy about it, but it hits Stan the hardest. Whether out of fear of the creature or that he believes he will hold his friends back in their quest to defeat evil, Stan calmly decides to end his own life. It's a horrible, deeply sad scene, and fans of the book had hoped maybe the remake would do things differently, but alas, it was not to be. Number 7. The Fireflies, The Devil's Rejects. What's this, I hear you cry? Rooting not only for villains, but a group of truly reprehensible people? Let me explain. Rob Zombie's sequel to his bizarre carnival ride, House of a Thousand Corpses, is a more straightforward affair. It's more grim and gritty, but the central family of monsters remain. Baby Firefly, Otis Driftwood, and Captain Spaulding all return as the film's antagonists. Or should I say protagonists? It's a bold move to make the villains of the last film the stars of this one, but Zombie oddly makes it work. The family do utterly repugnant things, but somehow you can't help but want them to win. It's a very strange place to put a viewer, without hitting them over the head with deep moral questions about humanizing monsters and all of that heavy stuff, but you just can't help but like this trio of terror. By the end of The Devil's Rejects, as Freebird plays out, and the Firefly clan drive into gunfire, many an audience member was surprised to find themselves almost shedding a tear. We all knew the trio's road trip of bloodshed couldn't end well for them, and we hoped it wouldn't, but a teeny tiny little part of us wanted to watch them head off into the sunset. Number 6. Jenny Greengrass, Eden Lake. If you haven't seen Eden Lake, be prepared for one of the most grim experiences you'll ever have with a movie. A young couple are holidaying in the countryside when they start getting harassed by a gang of young locals. Things only escalate from there, and eventually the lovebirds are fighting for their lives against this pack of teens. Boyfriend Steve perishes after a horrific torture sequence, leaving Jenny on her own. Time and time again, she narrowly avoids escape, and the viewer quietly cheers her on. But it becomes clearer and clearer this will not end well. Early on in Eden Lake, the couple raise their concerns to a parent, who is incredibly defensive of the gaggle of kids. Jenny is completely on her own, which becomes soul-crushingly evident by the film's finale. During that finale, Jenny finds herself at a neighborhood party, and desperately begs the adults there for help. The adults hosting the party, though, turn out to be the parents of the gang's leader, Brett, and of course, once their darling boy tells them it was Jenny who killed his friends, it's all over. We knew it would take a miracle to save Jenny, but the brutality and desperation of Eden Lake made us want her to escape even more. All we're left with are the echoes of her screams. Number 5. Christine Brown, Drag Me to Hell. Sam Raimi really knows how to put his protagonist through the ringer, doesn't he? However, nobody has it worse than Christine Brown in comedy horror Drag Me to Hell. She starts out desperate for a promotion, and even though she does come across as pretty cold and unfeeling when she denies an old woman an extension on her loan, she certainly didn't deserve any of what came next. That elderly lady curses Christine, and pretty soon the young woman is haunted by a demonic spirit and chaos ensues. Talking goats, horrific visions, and a whole lot of soul-eating are thrown Christine's way, and the audience gets the funny feeling that this curse may actually be her demise. There is a moment of hope though, as Christine seemingly manages to defeat the curse through an ancient ritual. Once that's happened, Drag Me to Hell seems set to end with our hero meeting her love interest at a train station with a new job and a new life on the horizon. But it's revealed she bungled the ritual, Army of Darkness original ending anyone, and suddenly the train tracks below open up into a fiery pit. As the title of the film implies, which perhaps let us know that Christine couldn't be saved before the movie even started, she's dragged down into the inferno kicking and screaming. It was such a simple mistake, and yet she paid dearly for it. Number 4. Barbara, Shaun of the Dead. When someone gets bitten by a zombie, even when it's a sweet mother in the mother of all rom-com movies, you know they aren't going to survive. Unfortunately, this is exactly what happens to Barbara in Shaun of the Dead. During a scuffle with one of the shambling undead, hero Shaun's mum Barbara is chomped on by a zombie. She does her best to hide it, not wanting to be a bother to the team of survivors, yet Barb's undying politeness can't save her, with the group finally catching on to what the viewer had already learned. There is no saving her. What makes it just that much worse is that Shaun has to kill his own mum, and we are just as distraught as our hero when he pulls the trigger on her. David we could have quite happily lost, which would only come moments later, but Barbara, the sweetest woman and possibly the only nice mum in any horror movie ever? Go and sit on the naughty step, Edgar Wright, and think about what you did. We're all very ashamed of you. Number 3. Dick Hallorann, The Shining. Blah blah, The Shining is a masterpiece of cinema and of horror, terrifies audiences to this day, that bit with the bear man is weird as hell, blah blah blah. Got it? Good. Yet for a movie that is so very frightening, there are only a few deaths in this film. In fact, only 2 occur on screen. Jack Torrance can go freeze his ass some more, but Dick Hallorann is the other unfortunate victim of the Overlook Hotel. Dick is the only friend that Danny Torrance has, acting as a mentor for Danny's blossoming supernatural abilities. Hallorann knows something's not quite right about the hotel, but he hasn't got a clue what horrors lie in those twisting corridors. Still, Dick bravely ventures back into the Overlook, and the viewer knows this won't end well for him. Jack is in full murderous rampage mode by now, and even with his psychic abilities, Dick doesn't stand a chance. Book fans didn't even have a leg up here, as Hallorann survived in the source material, but unfortunately the character's death is thought to have helped kickstart the far too common trope of black characters being killed first in horror movies, which viewers have since become desensitized to. An unfair and grim demise, but one that viewers saw coming, as Dick himself warned Danny how dangerous the hotel is for people who shine. The clues were all there, we just didn't want to believe them. Number 2. Seth Brundle, The Fly. We all have a soft spot for tragic villains who aren't really villains, don't we? Especially when they're played by Jeff Goldblum. The Fly is widely and rightfully lauded for its magnificent special effects, but the plot is just as strangely beautiful. Seth Brundle is an undeniably brilliant man, albeit a strange one, but it is his very brilliance that ultimately kills him, slowly, painfully, and before the very eyes of the woman he loves, who can do nothing to save him from himself. Anyone who has lost a loved one to illness knows what this feels like, wanting for them to be okay and madly believing they will get better, despite knowing, of course, this cannot happen. Seth knows his fate and swings between raging against it and accepting it. It's such a human way to respond to such an inhuman thing, and so we can't help but feel for Brundle despite knowing what's eventually going to happen. The Fly's ending is heartbreaking, but one that we saw coming for a long time. In a way, we're right there when Veronica is forced to shoot Seth. Number 1. The Crew, The Blair Witch Project. Alright, let's get super meta. Imagine you're watching The Blair Witch Project when it first came out. Some of you may have done so, however I am young and sprightly, so I will have to use my imagination. Everything you know about this movie is that the people who made it are nowhere to be found, and this documentary is all that remains that they even existed. So you know they're probably dead, and that sits in your mind as the movie goes on. So it's not really a question of if they die, but how and when. Even now, we know it was all just a marketing ploy to make the feature seem real, but the filmmakers at the centre of the story are still, in the universe of the Blair Witch Project, dead. And yeah, they are little shits with annoying qualities, but they're just kids at the end of the day. The worse their situation gets, the more you can't help but hope they can get out of it. But of course they don't. They're stuck in that never-ending cycle of being trapped in their own narrative. And on that cheery note, that's our list. What other characters did you want to see live? Let us know down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to catch more creepy content. I've been Tilly, and this has been What Culture. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Ta-ra!